Researchers now say almost all teens are spending about 8 to 9 hours a day staring at screens. That includes TV and video games. But new studies are showing what's really taking a toll on their brains is social media.
여러분들은 얼마나 많은 시간을 소셜미디어에 쏟고 계신가요? 얼마나 많은 좋아요를 누르고 얼마나 많은 정보들을 공유하나요? 나도 모르게 무의식적으로 핸드폰에 손이 갑니다. 우리는 현실이 아닌 온라인에서 더 많은 시간을 보내고 있을지도 몰라요. 아니, 더 많은 시간을 보내고 있습니다. 곧 보여드릴 결과는 꽤나 충격적일 거예요. 우리가 얼마나 많은 시간을 온라인에 쏟고 있는지 한번 보시죠.
The dots on this screen represent an adult life in months, assuming a life expectancy of 90. So if you're 18 years old right now, this is an optimistic estimate of the months that you have left. About a third of that time is going to be spent sleeping. On average, 126 of those months will go to school and your career. About 18 will be spent driving, 36 cooking and eating, 36 doing chores and errands, and about 27 in the bathroom and taking care of personal hygiene. So that leaves you with 334 months, optimistically, for everything else. So this is where you tick the boxes on your bucket list. This is where you pursue your passions and travel the world and leave your mark. How you spend this time is going to determine the quality of your life. But this time isn't just something that you spend, it's also something that you invest. Because what you do with it will quite literally determine the kind of person you become. The body, mind, and character that you will have in the future are being actively shaped by how you choose to use your time today. So take a second and ask yourself, what do you want to do with that free time? What things do you want to do that you haven't done? Who do you want to spend that time with? What is worth investing it in? Now, I would be willing to bet that scrolling through TikTok, binge watching Netflix, and playing video games probably did not come to mind. But today, the average 18-year-old in the United States is on pace to spend 93% of their remaining free time looking at a screen.
우리의 인생을 전체적으로 봤을 때 우리가 스크린에 쓰는 시간은 꽤나 충격적입니다. 개인마다 그 격차가 있겠지만 소셜미디어는 우리의 삶을 갉아먹고 있습니다. 소셜미디어가 미치는 긍정적인 영향도 물론 있겠지만 부정적인 영향이 더 크다는 것은 수많은 연구 사례를 통해 검증되고 있습니다.
We have these two studies that were able to uniquely show that social media affected behavior and symptoms over the long term.
One of those studies included nearly 4,000 Canadian adolescents who participated in annual surveys for 5 years. Researchers found social media use is associated with longer-lasting increases in conduct problems.
You would see parallel increases in their tendency to report getting into fights, getting into arguments, acting aggressively.
Patricia Conrad teaches psychiatry at the University of Montreal. She says kids do many things on social media, but it's possible that instead of doing mentally challenging tasks that develop strong cognitive and decision-making skills, teens are spending more time passively scrolling through short, unedited content with few sophisticated messages or storylines.
It's a very passive way of using your brain and doesn't train it to begin to develop some of the cognitive control that you need in order to be a mature decision maker and thinker.
Students are coming to me with concerns that they can't focus during exams because they're so used to scrolling on TikTok or looking through their phone.
Well, social media has essentially taken human connection and turned it into a drug by distilling it down to the essential properties that make something addictive.
When we're staring at our screens, we are constantly switching our attention between different pieces of information. The average TikTok is about 15 seconds long, and over 55% of web pages are viewed for 15 seconds or less. And if you're switching your attention every 15 seconds for an average of 8 hours and 39 minutes a day, you are training yourself to become chronically distracted.
이렇게 수많은 부정적인 부분들이 있음에도 불구하고 왜 우리는 소셜미디어를 절제하지 못하는 걸까요? 소셜미디어를 볼 때 우리의 뇌에서는 어떤 일이 일어나고 있을까요?
The brain controls thought, memory, emotion, along with all the five senses and every process that regulates our body. All those tasks are performed by pathways, where the brain sends messages to the nervous system and the nervous system sends messages back. We'll focus on the brain's reward system. Here is where dopamine is mostly produced, a type of neurotransmitter also called a feel-good hormone.
When we engage with social media, it releases a lot of dopamine in the brain's reward pathway, lights up the same part of the brain as drugs and alcohol. It's incredibly accessible. We have 24/7 access to this particular drug. TikTok never runs out. The AI algorithms learn what we've liked before and actually push to us the suggestion that we want to keep going or check out the next new thing.
인스타그램이나 유튜브 쇼츠를 볼 때면 우리는 끊임없이 스크롤을 내리고 있습니다. 마지막 페이지란 없습니다. 끊임없이 우리의 관심 분야를 보여주면서 우리를 끌어당기고 있습니다. 이것은 모두 다 계획된 디자인입니다.
That is by design. It's a consequence of a business model that has incentives which are fundamentally misaligned with your well-being. Because you are the product that social media sells. These services are free because they are monetizing you. They profit by helping advertisers change your future behavior, whether that be where you spend your time, how you spend your money, or even who you vote for. In order to do that, they have to do two things. They need to figure out which ads are going to influence you by collecting as much data about you as they possibly can, and then they need to show you as many of those ads as possible. So social media is free because you pay for it with your time. Their profit is directly linked to how long they can get you to scroll. And every social media platform is in a battle with each other to capture as much of your free time as possible.
우리의 시간을 어떻게 하면 설계된 소셜미디어로부터 지킬 수 있을까요?
Dr. Limke says moderation is key. She then recommends a dopamine fast and to become aware of the 3 C's: control, compulsion, and consequences.
If we're using it in an out-of-control way, if we're using it in an automatic, compulsive way that we can't stop even when we want to, and if we're having consequences as a result of our use, we really have to take a hard look at that behavior, try to make it change.
일단 스스로 인식하는 것이 중요합니다. 소셜미디어로 인해 내가 얻을 수 있는 가치가 무엇인지 생각해보고 나에게 도움이 되는 부분이 없다면 적절하게 사용할 수 있도록 내 자신이 노력해야 합니다.
Think about what that will do to your career, to your relationships, and to your ability to pursue the things that matter most to you.
내가 소셜미디어에 너무나 많은 시간을 투자하고 있는 것 같다면 언제 주로 사용하는지 깊게 관찰해보세요. 아침에 일어나자마자 인스타그램을 본다거나 아니면 일하는 중간에 쉬고 싶어서 또는 너무 머리 복잡한 일을 맞닥뜨렸을 때라든지 언제 사용하는지 고민해보고 왜 내가 그때 소셜미디어를 보려고 할까 곰곰이 생각해보면 좋을 것 같아요. 그리고 그 과정에서 소셜미디어를 대신하여 나에게 에너지를 줄 수 있는 다른 활동들로 채워보는 건 어떨까요? 예를 들면 아침 핸드폰 알람을 끄고 나서 소셜미디어에 자연스럽게 손이 간다면 핸드폰은 자기 전에 멀리 다른 곳에 두고 알람 기능을 하는 시계를 곁에 두거나 일하고 나서 잠깐 쉬고 싶을 때에는 소셜미디어 대신 음악을 듣거나 잠깐 산책을 하러 나가는 거죠. 아이들에게도 마찬가지입니다. 온라인 활동보다는 현실에 집중하도록 도움을 주는 건 어떨까요?
So I think it's really important to help your teen develop an interesting offline life. So it's one thing to just tell them to get off their devices, but they need to have other things to do. So help to foster different habits and encourage them to have in-person hangouts with their friends. Build independence in your child to get out of the house and do things on their own. You know, a lot of kids are staying home and the parents tend to think that they're safer to be at home on their devices, but in fact, it's much better for them to be out in the world, exploring and expressing themselves.
현실 속의 활동들을 하면서 우리가 느낄 수 있는 감각들을 느껴보는 것입니다. 미각, 후각, 촉각, 시각 청력들에 주의를 기울여 보는 것이죠. 내가 먹는 것의 맛을 좀 더 느껴보고 걸을 때는 하늘을 한번 바라다보고 귀를 기울여 새의 소리를 한번 들어보는 건 어떨까요? 핸드폰이 없던 시절 우리는 책을 읽고 문자 메시지 대신 편지를 썼습니다.
And when you start to compare the messages these platforms are sending with those of technologies from the past, you begin to get a sense of what we might be losing. Because the inherent structure of a book says that the world is complex and it takes time to understand. It compels us to walk in the shoes of other people and see things from their perspective with context. And it forces us to focus on one train of thought for an extended period of time, which nurtures our attention. And the letter tells us that our communication doesn't need to be frequent. It just needs to be deep.
나의 행동들을 제어하기가 쉽지 않다면 환경을 바꾸는 선택지도 있습니다. 핸드폰 잠금 장치를 사거나 핸드폰 설정에 있는 스크린 타임을 사용하여 앱 시간을 제한하는 방법도 있습니다.
But we need to learn to use it in moderation. Don't let yourself get to the age of 90, only to look back on your life and realize that while you were trying to avoid FOMO, you actually missed out on living. That free time is your most valuable resource. Do not give it away for free.
소셜미디어가 나의 삶을 잡아먹고 있는 것 같다면 잡아먹히는 시간을 조금씩 우리의 현실로 가져와 보는 건 어떨까요? 오늘도 영어도 잡고 라이프도 잡는 하루가 되셨길 바라며 English Life Catcher였습니다.
Now, I would be willing to bet that scrolling through TikTok, binge watching Netflix, and playing video games probably did not come to mind. Binge watching Netflix, and playing video games probably did not come to mind. Probably did not come to mind. Probably did not come to mind.
Well, social media has essentially taken human connection and turned it into a drug, and turned it into a drug, and turned it into a drug.